Officer James Miller walked the halls of the Riverdale courthouse like he owned the place. Today was courthouse duty, his favorite assignment. Here, he had power over people waiting for their trials. He fixed his belt and smiled. 15 years on the police force had taught him many things. The most important lesson was that he could get away with almost anything. "Hey, Miller, got some new ones for you," said the transport officer, leading 5 men in handcuffs into the holding area. Miller looked them over with cold eyes. 4 white guys and 1 black man. Miller's attention locked on the black man right away. The black man was Marcus Johnson, 25 years old. He sat quietly in the corner of the holding cell. Unlike the others, who looked scared or angry, Marcus seemed calm. He was reading through some papers, his lips moving slightly as he practiced what he would say to the judge. Marcus was not a criminal. He was a second-year law student at the state university. Last week, he had been driving home from night classes when Officer Miller's partner pulled him over for a broken taillight. The stop should have ended with a warning or a small ticket. But when Marcus questioned why the officer needed to search his car, the officer called for backup. That backup was Officer Miller. "What's with the hair?" Miller now asked, standing in front of Marcus's seat. Miller pointed at Marcus's dreadlocks, which were tied back neatly for court. The dreadlocks had taken Marcus 3 years to grow. They were his pride. "Just my hair, sir," Marcus answered politely, not looking up from his papers. He knew how these things worked. Stay calm, be respectful, don't give them any reason. "Look at me when I talk to you," Miller said, his voice getting harder. Marcus raised his eyes slowly. "Yes, sir." "In my courthouse, we have standards," Miller said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You think a judge wants to see that mess on your head. You think that makes a good impression." The other men in the holding cell looked away. They knew what was coming. They had seen Miller do this before to other black men who came through. "My appearance isn't against any law," Marcus said carefully. "I've dressed appropriately for court." Miller's face turned red. He wasn't used to people talking back, especially not someone like Marcus. "You think because you have some college education, you can disrespect me. You think you know the law better than me." Marcus stayed quiet this time. He knew he had made a mistake by responding. Officer Miller walked to a cabinet at the side of the room and unlocked it. He pulled out electric hair clippers. "Court policy says defendants must look presentable," Miller said, making up rules that didn't exist. "And I decide what's presentable." 2 other officers who were in the room looked uncomfortable but said nothing. They never stood up to Miller. "You can't do this," Marcus said, his calm finally breaking. "This is wrong. Put your hands behind your back, or I'll add resisting to your charges," Miller threatened. Marcus knew he had no choice. Fighting would only make things worse. With shaking hands, he put his papers down. Miller grabbed him roughly by the shoulder and pushed his head down. The sound of the clippers filled the room. Chunks of Marcus's dreadlocks fell to the floor. Miller wasn't being careful. He left patches uneven, purposely making Marcus look ridiculous. The other defendants watched in silence, their eyes showing fear and shame for not helping. Tears formed in Marcus's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. As the last of his dreadlocks hit the floor, Marcus made a promise to himself. Marcus sat in the courtroom with his head down. He could feel people staring at his badly shaved head. Parts of it were almost bald, while other spots still had short pieces of his dreadlocks sticking out. He touched his head gently, feeling the uneven cuts. His fingers came away with a few drops of blood where Officer Miller's clippers had scratched his scalp. "Case number 47, Marcus Johnson," called the court clerk. "Traffic violations and resisting an officer." Marcus stood up slowly. He walked to the front of the courtroom, feeling dizzy with shame and anger. As he passed the rows of seats, he heard whispers and a few laughs. Officer Miller stood at the side of the room, watching with a small smile on his face. Judge William Thompson looked down at Marcus from his high bench. He was an older white man with gray hair and cold eyes. He had been a judge in Riverdale for over 30 years. Everyone knew he was friends with the police chief and rarely ruled against officers. "Mr. Johnson," Judge Thompson said, looking at the papers in front of him instead of at Marcus, "you are charged with speeding, driving with a broken taillight, and resisting an officer's commands. How do you plead?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Not guilty to all charges, Your Honor, and I would like to report misconduct by Officer Miller before these proceedings continue." Judge Thompson frowned. "This is not the place for complaints, young man. We're here about your violations." 5 years passed. Marcus Johnson sat in the university library late at night. Books and papers covered the table around him. His hair had grown back, but he kept it short now. Not because of shame, but because it reminded him of his purpose. The path had not been easy. After that day in court, Marcus had worked harder than ever before. He took extra classes, studied through holidays, and worked 2 jobs to pay for school. Some nights he only slept 3 hours, but tonight was different. Tonight, he was finishing his final paper for law school. "Library's closing in 10 minutes, called the librarian. Marcus nodded and saved his work on his laptop. Tomorrow he would turn in his paper, and next week he would graduate at the top of his class. His professors called him exceptional. His classmates respected him. But few knew the real reason behind his drive. Every time Marcus read about unfair treatment in the justice system, he remembered Officer Miller's face. Every time he studied civil rights violations, he touched his head where the clippers had cut him. The memory no longer brought shame. Now it brought determination. The next morning, Marcus turned in his final paper. As he walked across campus, his phone rang. It was his mother. "Marcus, I'm so proud of you," she said. Her voice was tired but happy. She had worked double shifts as a nurse to help him stay in school. "First in our family to finish college, and now finishing law school at the top of your class." "Thanks, Mom," Marcus said, smiling. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Have you thought about what's next?" she asked. "The big firms will be fighting to hire you." Marcus had received offers from law firms in big cities. They offered high salaries and prestige. But he had already made his decision. "I'm going back to Riverdale," he told her. "I've been accepted for a position as a public defender." There was silence on the phone. His mother knew what had happened to him in Riverdale 5 years ago. She had seen him come home with his head badly shaved and tears in his eyes. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "That place has bad memories for you." "That's exactly why I need to go back," Marcus explained. "The people there need someone who understands what it's like to be treated unfairly. They need someone who will really fight for them." 1 week later, Marcus graduated with honors. 2 weeks after that, he moved back to Riverdale. The town hadn't changed much. The same shops lined Main Street. The same courthouse stood in the center of town, its stone steps worn from years of use. On his first day as a public defender, Marcus walked up those steps wearing a new suit his mother had helped him buy. Inside, he was assigned an office barely bigger than a closet. His desk was old, and his chair squeaked. But Marcus didn't mind. He was exactly where he needed to be. That afternoon, he met his first client. She was a young black woman charged with shoplifting. She looked scared. "They're saying I took something, but I didn't," she told Marcus, her hands shaking. "The store owner just doesn't like me. No one will believe me against him." Marcus looked her in the eyes. "I believe you," he said, "and I'm going to help you prove it." For the next 3 years, Marcus worked harder than anyone else in the public defender's office. He won cases that seemed impossible. He worked late into the night preparing for trials. He treated every client with respect, no matter what they were accused of doing. Word spread about the young lawyer who fought so hard for justice. The people in Riverdale's poor neighborhoods began to hope when they heard Marcus Johnson would be their lawyer. But the police and some judges weren't happy, especially Officer James Miller, who started to lose cases when Marcus was the defense attorney. Marcus sat at his desk reviewing case files late one evening. His small office was crowded with stacks of papers. Pictures drawn by grateful clients' children covered one wall. After 3 years as a public defender, Marcus had helped hundreds of people in Riverdale. The office door opened, and his boss, Sarah Chen, walked in. She was the head of the public defender's office and had hired Marcus right out of law school. "Still working?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "It's almost 9 o'clock." Marcus looked up and smiled. "Just finishing up for tomorrow's case." Sarah nodded. "That's what I want to talk to you about. Officer Miller is the arresting officer, isn't he?" Marcus's smile faded. "Yes. 3rd time this month my client has been arrested by him. Always the same pattern, minor offense, but somehow turns into multiple charges." Sarah sat down across from Marcus. "You've won your last 4 cases against him. He's getting angry. I heard he complained to the police chief about you." "Let him complain," Marcus said. "I'm just doing my job." "I know," Sarah said. "And you're doing it better than anyone else here. That's why I want to tell you something." She paused. "Judge Thompson is retiring next month." Judge Thompson. The same judge who had fined Marcus 5 years ago. The same judge who almost always sided with the police. "Who's taking his place?" Marcus asked. "That's the interesting part," Sarah replied. "The governor gets to appoint someone, and I've been talking to people who know people." She smiled. "Your name has come up." Marcus stared at her in shock. "Me? A judge? I've only been practicing law for 3 years. 3 incredible years," Sarah corrected him. "You've won more cases than lawyers with twice your experience. The community trusts you. And the governor is under pressure to appoint more diverse judges." Marcus leaned back in his chair. He had never thought about becoming a judge, at least not so soon. He had planned to work as a public defender for many more years. "Think about the good you could do," Sarah continued. "Instead of fighting the system case by case, you could help change it from within." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He thought about what Sarah had said. As a judge, he would have power to make sure everyone was treated fairly in his courtroom. No one would be humiliated like he had been. The next morning, Marcus called Sarah. "If they're really considering me, I want to be considered." 4 weeks later, Marcus sat in the governor's office. The governor, a tall woman with silver hair, looked at him across her desk. "Mr. Johnson, your record is impressive," she said. "But some people say you're too young, too inexperienced." "With all respect, Governor," Marcus replied, "my experience is exactly what's needed. I've seen our justice system from both sides, as someone caught in it unfairly, and as someone fighting to make it work correctly." The governor studied him for a long moment. "There will be resistance. Some of the older judges, some of the police officers. They won't like this appointment." Marcus met her eyes steadily. Change never comes without resistance. 2 days later, the news broke. The headline in the Riverdale Gazette read, "Governor appoints youngest judge in county history." Marcus's phone rang all day with congratulations from friends, former clients, and his proud mother. But not everyone was happy. At the police station, Officer Miller threw the newspaper against the wall. "This is a joke," he said to anyone who would listen. "That troublemaker becoming a judge. He's got no respect for law enforcement." The police chief patted Miller's shoulder. "Don't worry about it. He'll be assigned to small cases, traffic court probably. He won't have any real power." But the chief was wrong. The next week, it was announced that Judge Marcus Johnson would be taking over Judge Thompson's courtroom, the main criminal court in Riverdale County. The day before Marcus would start as judge, he visited his mother. They sat in her small kitchen drinking tea. His mother had aged in the past few years. Her hair had more gray, and her hands showed the years of hard work. But her eyes were bright with pride as she looked at her son. "Tomorrow's the big day," she said, squeezing his hand. "How do you feel?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Nervous, happy, scared, all of those things." She nodded. That's how I felt on your first day of school. And when you went to college and law school. She paused. I have something for you. She got up and went to her bedroom. When she returned, she was carrying a wooden box. Inside was a gavel, the small hammer judges use in court. It's not fancy, she said. I saved up for it. The man at the store said judges usually bring their own. Marcus carefully picked up the gavel. It was simple but beautiful, made of dark wood that shone in the light. Mom, this is perfect, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. She smiled. I'm just sorry your father isn't here to see this. He would have been so proud. Marcus's father had died when Marcus was 12. He had always told Marcus to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. He is seeing it, Marcus said softly. I know he is. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the courthouse early. He wore a new black suit and carried a small bag containing his mother's gavel. The courthouse looked different today. He wasn't coming here as a defendant or as a lawyer. Today, he was Judge Marcus Johnson. Court staff greeted him respectfully as he walked to his new office behind the courtroom. The office was large and had a big desk, comfortable chairs, and bookshelves filled with law books. On the wall hung Judge Thompson's old diploma. Soon it would be replaced with Marcus. A clerk knocked on the door. Judge Johnson, court starts in 30 minutes. Here's the list of cases for today. Marcus took the list and thanked her. He scanned the names and charges. Mostly small crimes, shoplifting, trespassing, minor drug possession. These were the kinds of cases he had defended for years. He knew how these charges could change people's lives forever. He put on the black judge's robe that hung on a hook by the door. It felt heavy on his shoulders. Marcus looked at himself in the mirror. The young man with the badly shaved head was gone. In his place stood a judge who had the power to make sure what happened to him wouldn't happen to others. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the clerk called the courtroom to order. All rise. The Riverdale County Court is now in session, the Honorable Judge Marcus Johnson presiding. Marcus walked into the courtroom. Everyone stood up. From the lawyers' tables to the public seats at the back, all eyes were on him. Some people looked surprised to see such a young judge. Others smiled, recognizing him from his days as a public defender. Marcus took his seat at the bench. It was much higher than he expected. From here, he could see the entire courtroom. The prosecutor's table, the defense table, the witness stand, and at the side door where defendants were brought in, the court officers. Marcus's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Standing by that door, in his police uniform with his hand on his gun belt, was Officer James Miller. Miller hadn't noticed Marcus yet. He was talking to another officer, laughing about something. You may be seated, Marcus said to the courtroom. His voice was calm and steady, even though his heart was racing. As people sat down, Officer Miller finally looked toward the judge's bench. His eyes met Marcus. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Miller's face changed. First confusion, then recognition, then complete shock. The other officer said something to him, but Miller didn't respond. He just stood there, frozen, as the color drained from his face. Marcus kept his face calm as he looked at Officer Miller. Inside, many feelings fought for control. Anger at what this man had done to him. Satisfaction at seeing the fear in Miller's eyes. But mostly, Marcus felt the heavy weight of responsibility. He was a judge now. He had to be fair, even to people who had not been fair to him. First case, Marcus called out, looking down at his papers. The court clerk read from her list. Case number 103, State versus Robert Davis, charged with public intoxication. A young white man was brought in. He looked nervous as he stood before the bench. The prosecutor, a woman in a gray suit, stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Davis was found sleeping on a park bench at 2 a.m. He had an open bottle of alcohol and could not stand without help. We ask for the maximum fine. Marcus nodded and turned to the public defender. Does the defendant have anything to say? The public defender, A man Marcus used to work with spoke up. "Your Honor, Mr. Davis lost his job last month. He has no previous record. He made a mistake and is very sorry." Marcus looked at the defendant. "Mr. Davis, do you have a place to live?" The young man looked surprised at the question. "Not right now, Your Honor. I've been staying with friends when I can." Marcus thought for a moment. He remembered his first lesson in law school. Justice is not just about punishment. "Mr. Davis, I'm going to give you a choice," Marcus said. "You can pay a $100 fine, or you can spend 30 days in the county's job training program. They'll help you find work and housing." Relief spread across the young man's face. "The program, Your Honor. Thank you." As the morning went on, Marcus handled each case carefully. He gave fair sentences that fit the crimes. Some people got community service. Others got small fines. One woman with many previous arrests got jail time. But each person who came before him was treated with respect. Through it all, Officer Miller stood by the door. His face had gone from shock to angry. Twice, Marcus saw him whispering to other officers and pointing at the bench. At noon, Marcus called for a lunch break. As people filed out of the courtroom, he saw Miller talking to the prosecutor. They both looked his way. Marcus knew what was happening. Miller was telling her about their past. Instead of going to his office, Marcus went to the courthouse library. He needed a quiet place to think. As he sat among the law books, the door opened. It was Sarah Chin, his old boss. "Quite a first morning," she said, sitting across from him. "Word is spreading fast about the new judge who's actually fair." Marcus smiled slightly. "And I'm sure other words are spreading too." Sarah nodded. "Officer Miller is telling everyone who will listen about what happened years ago. He's trying to make you look bad, saying you have a grudge against police." "Do you think it will work?" Marcus asked. Sarah shook her head. "No. Most people respect what you've done today. And Miller doesn't have many friends left. Too many complaints against him over the years. I can't treat him differently," Marcus said. "That would make me just like him." "I know," Sarah said. "That's why you're the judge, and he's still just a bully with a badge." She stood up. "Ready for the afternoon session. I heard Miller is the arresting officer on the next case." Marcus took a deep breath. This would be the real test. Could he be fair when Miller was directly involved? He had to be. Justice demanded it. "I'm ready," he said, standing up. He straightened his robe and touched the gavel in his pocket. "Let's get back to court." After lunch, the courtroom filled up again. More people had come in. News had spread about the new judge, and many wanted to see him in action. Marcus noticed some familiar faces in the back rows. People he had helped as a public defender. "Court is now in session," the clerk announced as Marcus took his seat. "Next case," Marcus said, his voice steady. The clerk called out, "Case number 108, State versus Maria Gonzalez, charged with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer." A small woman in her 40s was led in. She had a bruise on her face and looked scared. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, 2 days ago, Officer Miller was responding to a noise complaint. The defendant refused to cooperate and became violent, striking Officer Miller in the process." Marcus looked at the defense table. The public defender was Tom Wright, a friend of Marcus. "Your Honor," Tom began, "Ms. Gonzalez doesn't speak much English. She was confused when Officer Miller entered her apartment without clearly identifying himself. She did not assault him. She simply raised her hands to protect herself." Marcus turned to the prosecutor. "Is there body camera footage of this incident?" The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Officer Miller's camera was not functioning at the time. Marcus wasn't surprised. Miller's camera never seemed to work when there were complaints about his behavior. "Officer Miller," Marcus called, "please take the stand." Miller walked stiffly to the witness stand. He glared at Marcus as he was sworn in. "Officer Miller, please tell the court what happened," Marcus said calmly. Miller straightened his uniform. I responded to a complaint about loud music. I knocked on the door and identified myself as police. When Ms. Gonzalez opened the door, I asked her to turn down the music. She became aggressive and hit me on the chest. "Did you have a Spanish-speaking officer with you?" Marcus asked. Miller frowned. "No, but she understands English." She answered the door when I knocked. "Did you enter her apartment before or after she allegedly struck you?" Miller hesitated. "Before. I needed to make sure no one else was there." "Did you have a warrant to enter her home?" "No," Miller admitted, "but I had probable cause." "What was that probable cause exactly?" Marcus asked. Miller's face grew red. "I heard loud music and suspected drug activity." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on my years of experience," Miller snapped. Marcus turned to Ms. Gonzalez. Through a court interpreter who had been brought in, he asked, "Can you tell me what happened?" The woman spoke softly in Spanish. The interpreter translated. "I was playing music while cleaning. Someone banged on my door. When I opened it, a man pushed his way in. I didn't know he was police. I raised my hands like this." She demonstrated a defensive gesture. "Then he grabbed me and pushed me against the wall." Marcus looked at photos from her arrest. The bruise on her face matched what would happen if someone was pushed against a wall. "Officer Miller," Marcus said, "did you identify yourself clearly in Spanish?" "I don't speak Spanish," Miller said angrily. "This is America. She should learn English." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Marcus tapped his gavel once. "Officer, that's not how the law works," Marcus said. "The burden was on you to make sure she understood." Marcus studied the papers before him. This was the moment. He could punish Miller through this case. He could make him feel small and helpless, just as Miller had done to him years ago. But that wasn't justice. That would make him no better than Miller. "Based on the evidence presented," Marcus said, "I find insufficient grounds for these charges. Case dismissed." Ms. Gonzalez began to cry with relief when the interpreter told her what happened. Officer Miller stood up from the witness stand, his face dark with anger. "You're only doing this because of what happened before," Miller said loudly. "This is personal. You have no right to be a judge." The courtroom went completely silent after Officer Miller's outburst. All eyes moved between the angry officer and Judge Marcus Johnson. The court security officers stepped closer, unsure what to do. Should they remove a fellow officer from the courtroom? Marcus remained calm. He had expected something like this might happen. He looked directly at Miller. "Officer Miller, you are speaking out of turn in my courtroom," Marcus said firmly. "If you have concerns about my fitness as a judge, there are proper channels to address them. Everyone should know what you're doing," Miller continued, his voice getting louder. 5 years ago, this man was in my custody. He was disrespectful then, and now he's using his position to get back at me." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Marcus tapped his gavel 3 times. The room fell silent again. "Officer Miller, I am holding you in contempt of court," Marcus said. "You will be fined $500. If you continue this behavior, I will have no choice but to have you removed from this courtroom." Miller's face turned dark red. For a moment, it seemed like he might say more. Then the police chief appeared at the back of the courtroom and gave Miller a hard look. Miller finally turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Marcus took a deep breath. "We will take a 15-minute recess," he announced. In his chambers, Marcus sat at his desk with his eyes closed. His hands were shaking slightly. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," he called. The police chief, Richard Davis, entered. He was a tall man with gray hair who had been in charge of the Riverdale Police Department for 20 years. "Judge Johnson," he said formally, "I want to apologize for Officer Miller's behavior. It was completely unprofessional." Marcus nodded. "Thank you, Chief Davis." Chief Davis looked uncomfortable. "Miller told me about your history, about what happened 5 years ago." "I'm sure he did," Marcus said. "But that has nothing to do with how I handle cases in my courtroom." "I can see that," the chief said. You dismissed the case because the evidence didn't support it, not because you wanted revenge. He paused. For what it's worth, Miller has had many complaints against him over the years. I've tried to retire him early, but he has connections on the city council. Marcus was surprised by the chief's honesty. Why are you telling me this? Chief Davis sighed. Because our department needs to change. Officers like Miller give all of us a bad name. He looked directly at Marcus. I hoped having a new judge might help clean things up around here. When court resumed, Marcus continued hearing cases, but news of what had happened spread quickly through the small town. By the end of the day, the courtroom was packed with people. Some were there to support Marcus. Others wanted to see if he would be fair to police after what Miller had said. That evening, Marcus walked out of the courthouse tired but satisfied with his first day. As he reached his car, he saw Officer Miller leaning against it, waiting for him. Marcus stopped, alert but not afraid. You think you've won, Miller said in a low voice, but this isn't over. I have friends in this town, important friends. By next week, everyone will be calling for you to step down. Marcus unlocked his car door. Officer Miller, I'm not trying to win anything. I'm just doing my job, the same as I expect you to do yours. You have no idea what's coming, Miller threatened. No idea at all. As Miller walked away, Marcus watched him go. He knew the officer wouldn't give up easily. The real battle was just beginning. Over the next week, Marcus faced exactly what Miller had promised. The local newspaper ran a story questioning whether Marcus was too young and inexperienced to be a judge. Anonymous comments appeared online claiming Marcus was biased against police. 2 city council members publicly asked the governor to reconsider his appointment. But something unexpected happened too. People Marcus had helped as a public defender began to speak up. They told their stories about how Marcus had treated them with respect and fought for their rights. Court workers shared how fair he had been during his first week as judge. Even some police officers quietly admitted that Marcus was treating them professionally in his courtroom. On Friday morning, Marcus sat in his office preparing for the day's cases. There was a knock at his door. It was Sarah Chen. You need to see this, she said, handing him the morning newspaper. The headline read, Officer Suspended After Investigation. The story below explained that Officer James Miller had been suspended pending an investigation into multiple complaints of misconduct. The police chief had ordered a review of all cases involving Miller over the past 5 years. This is Chief Davis's doing, Sarah said. He must have been waiting for the right moment. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. It was the mayor's office, asking him to come to an emergency meeting. 1 hour later, Marcus sat in the mayor's conference room. The mayor, the police chief, and several city council members were there. Judge Johnson, the mayor said, we have a situation. Officer Miller has made serious accusations about you. He says you're using your position to get revenge for something that happened years ago. We need to hear your side. Marcus looked around the room. Some faces were friendly, others hostile. He had a choice. He could deny everything and hope no one discovered the truth, or he could tell the full story. 5 years ago, Marcus began. I was a law student. I was arrested for a broken taillight. In the courthouse holding cell, Officer Miller forcibly shaved my head to humiliate me. When I tried to report it to Judge Thompson, I was ignored and fined for contempt of court. The room was silent. Marcus continued. That experience didn't make me hate police or the justice system. It made me want to improve it. Every decision I've made as a judge has been based on the law and the facts, not on personal feelings. Chief Davis spoke up. I've reviewed the tapes from Judge Johnson's courtroom. He's been fair to everyone, including officers who arrested him years ago. An older council member frowned. But why didn't you tell anyone about this history when you were appointed? Because it shouldn't matter, Marcus answered. A good judge doesn't let personal history affect their decisions. I wanted to be judged by my actions, not by what happened to me. The meeting ended without a clear resolution. As Marcus left City Hall, He wondered if he would still be a judge next week. 3 days later, the answer came. The governor issued a statement fully supporting Judge Marcus Johnson and praising his extraordinary fairness in difficult circumstances. Officer Miller's suspension became permanent, and he later resigned from the force. 1 year passed. In his courtroom, Judge Marcus Johnson developed a reputation for being tough but fair. He treated everyone with respect, rich or poor, black or white, police officer or defendant. The changes he brought spread beyond his courtroom. More diverse officers were hired. Body cameras were always turned on. Complaints against police dropped by half. Sometimes, Marcus would touch his head, remembering the day his dreadlocks were cut off. What had started as humiliation had led him to where he was meant to be. Not for revenge, but for justice. Real justice for everyone who entered his courtroom.